John.
Welcome everyone. Thanks for coming. I'm incredibly excited to be here to talk to you about Kotlin. In this talk, my goal is to teach you something about Kotlin and show you how you can use Kotlin to build less crashable and more robust apps while having fun developing it. Okay, so before we begin, just a show of hands. How many of you are Android developers over here? Awesome. And how many of you have used Kotlin before or have heard about it? Great, great number. And how many of you are using it in production? So that's going to increase. So a little bit about me. I'm an entrepreneur and I'm an Android developer by heart. I'm an active community speaker. I've been promoting Kotlin since been using through blogs, articles, and meetups, and even workshops before it was official. And I graduated in 2016. And I also gave the Google Android certification exam. You might see my shiny little badge over there. And you can follow me on Twitter to get up to date about the Kotlin stuff like that. So here's the agenda for today. First, we'll look at what Kotlin is, look at its features, some cool. We'll have some cool live demos to make it some fun, and at the end of the session, we'll have some questions. So why Kotlin? Any guesses on why you should do Kotlin? Because Google announced it as official language for Android in Google I/O 2017. That's one of the biggest reasons. So let's look at what is Kotlin. So Kotlin basically is an island, similar to Java island. So Kotlin is a new programming language targeting JVM, Android, and even JavaScript, and it is also going to support iOS in the later future. So let's break it down to understand like what it means exactly. So Kotlin is modern. Basically, by that it means that it ships with modern features like Lambda functions, higher order functions, and whatever new languages like Golang are shipping with. And secondly, it's statically typed. Statically typed means that the type of the variable needs to be determined at the compile time itself. That means you don't get surprises at the runtime, like you do in JavaScript. Secondly, it targets JVM. By that, it means that when you compile Kotlin code, it generates a bytecode which is readable by JVM machine. So that means like how when we compile a Java code, it is readable by JVM. The bytecode is readable by JVM. Same way, Kotlin bytecode is readable by JVM. And as Android uses JVM, that's why Kotlin can be used on Android. A different topic, it can take another talk. And so then in upcoming months, there's also iOS support and native support. You can use Kotlin at anywhere. So that's a different topic for another talk. Thirdly, Kotlin works everywhere with Java. So we can write desktop apps, system apps, web apps, and Android apps. Everything wherever you wrote Java, you can write in Kotlin. So the biggest selling point of Kotlin is 100% interoperable with Java. So that means you can write 50% of your code in Kotlin and 50% of your code in Android, Java, sorry, and still make that app functional. And lastly, which was very missing in Java, Kotlin brings the functional features. So you can mix match both of the paradigms and build better apps as per your requirement. And it's made by some good folks at JetBrains. So JetBrains is a company. It's a maker of suite of IDEs like IntelliJ, Android Studio, and etc. They make very cool IDEs. And of course, Kotlin is open source. It's under Apache 2 license. So it's a brief introduction about Kotlin. So before we go to the features, we will have a syntax crash course. I'll just give you some basic idea of how things work out in Kotlin. I won't be diving deeper because it's pretty similar to Java. And the documentation is pretty good. You can, later after this session, you can go to the documentation and read about it. So here's how we declare a variable in Kotlin. We use a val_var keyword, then the name of the variable, and then the type, which is optional, provided that the compiler is able to identify it at the compile time. And then comes the value, like val spell lumos. You can even explicitly specify the value using the colon in the last case and the type of the variable. So we will look at what difference is in val or var, but it looks pretty similar, right? And also you might notice there's no new, there is no new before analyst. That's because there's no new keyword in Kotlin. So as I said, to declare a variable, we use either val or var. So let's look at what difference is there in between both of them. So use a val for a value that won't change. That means it's immutable. And use var for value that will change with time. It is preferred that you use val wherever possible, because that gives thread safety and proper behavior of the program is maintained. So this is how we write functions in Kotlin. We use a fun keyword, hoping that it is fun to write functions, and the name of the function and the parameter name and types are reversed, like Haskell notation, and the return type is added at the end of the function signature. So this is a basic addition function, how we do add in Kotlin. And you can even do this. You can just directly cut the return type and cut the return code and just directly write equal to a plus b. You can make it the code clean and concise. And if there are some cases where when compiler is not able to infer the return type automatically for some function, then you can explicitly tell it by using the colon, similar to last case we saw. And the much awaited feature, you can even give default values, which was missing in Java very much. So you can give default values to any Kotlin function, and there's also named arguments, which we missed a lot. So that's a good function. So let's look at some cool features of Kotlin, which makes it fun and interesting to use. So one of the most common reasons for AND apps to crash is null pointer exception. It is very, it takes a lot of time to debug the issue and solve it. And but what if I told you we can eliminate the NPs? The great thing about Kotlin is it comes with a null safety system built into the language itself, so which helps you eliminate nulls at the compile time rather than the at the runtime. So if you catch the nulls at the compile time, that means there's not going to be crash at the runtime. So let's look how to do that. So this is how we declare a null. By default, all the variables declared in Kotlin are not nullable. So they cannot be assigned null unless you explicitly tell the compiler that it's a null value using a question mark as I specified in front of the type, using a string question mark. So that way, if you try to declare a variable as null without the question mark, it will give a compile time error. So if the code won't compile and you won't be able to see, run the app on your phone. Even if you declare a variable and then try to set it as a null, even then it will give a compile time error because it's not nullable value and you're trying to set it as null. And if it's a nullable value and then you try to set as null, then it's fine. So you can see how smart the Kotlin compiler is, and it helps very much in catching nulls. So this is about how we declare nulls, but let's see how we access the variables, null variables. So there's a null safety system. If you try to access a null value directly, it will result into a compile time error. So you don't see a runtime error, rather you will get a compile time error and you can fix it there and there. So in order to access a nullable value, you need to cast a protection system before using it. Like in the second case, we have used the if loop and we have checked if the spell variable is going to be null or not. So that way, if it's not going to be null, that particular part is going to execute. So that way, Kotlin compiler is smart and it knows that inside the if loop, the spell variable in our case is not going to be null. So that prevents runtime exceptions. And there's also an idiomatic way and Kotlinized way of writing, handling null. So this is the Kotlinized way. So rather than writing if loop, you can just directly write a spell _length, and if there's a value for spell, it will the length of the value spell variable will return. Else, if the spell variable is null, it won't result into a crash. So that way you're safe. And point to note over here is the val length in the first case will be a nullable value. That means if you try to access it next in other part of your code, you need to cast a protection system. You need to either handle it using a if not null condition, something like that. So second case is pretty straightforward. You just pass else value. If the value of spell is null, return -1. If the value exists, if the value of spell exists, then the length will be returned. So unlike the first val length, in this val length, the value is going to be not nullable, which is better. So that's what about null safety system, and then we will look at Lambda expression. So Lambda expression basically means passing an anonymous function to another function. So I won't be diving deeper into Lambda expression because that's a topic for another talk. But you can go through it, and it's pretty simple to understand, by the way. So this is how we write set on click listener for a button. I am pretty sure that every one of you has used set on click listener or some kind of listener in Java. So this is how we write. We create an anonymous class object on new on click listener and kind of that was before Java 8. And with Kotlin, you can just cut the code and just focus on your main logic. So just set on click listener and your logic. That's it. So it's as clean and concise as it. So of course, with Java 8, you can write the same code which is done in Kotlin, but we'll look why Kotlin is better than Java 8. So extension functions. So how many of you have missed calling .show on toast or snack bar or a dialog? A show of hands. At some point, all of us have, right? So, we all have felt the need of adding a particular function to an existing class. For example, you were trying to build a login form and you wanted to check that if the string is email or not. And you felt that if there was a function called as isEmail in the string class, but you couldn't because string class is final, right? So, but with Kotlin, with this extension function feature, you can inject a function into an existing class without modifying the original class. So basically, it means, in short, in a nutshell, it means that you can add any function to class, an existing class. I mean, it is pretty similar to the implementation of C#. So let's look at an example of extension function. So this is an example. Wouldn't you like to have such a toast method? So you just write toast and the string, whatever you wanna, whatever the message you want to print, and just forget about calling .show, right? It would be so cool to have such a function. Or for snack bar, just pass the view on which you wanna attach the snack bar, and then this message you want to print. Wouldn't it be cool to have such? So yeah, it would be cool. So let's look at the code, how we can implement such a method. So this is the code to have such a toast method. So it is pretty similar to a normal function of Kotlin. It's just that at the front, before the name of the function, we have added the name of the base class on which we are injecting this function, which is activity, because you want that toast method to be called from activity, right? So what we did is we injected a toast method into activity, and we just passed the parameters, and of course I have passed the default value. If the duration is not passed, then take it as length short. If something is passed, then take whatever is passed. And you can see in the next line, toast.make text, this in this case is the activity context of activity. So pretty cool, right? And you don't need to remember now to call .show. So that is extension function. And previously, before Kotlin, we used to write util classes. Most of us written account utils, the view utils, and utils, and so many classes. It was util help. So with Kotlin, you don't need to write a lot of util classes. Just one file called as extensions or whatever name you want, and put all your extension functions in that, and that will be great. So the same implementation can be done for snack bar. So higher order function. Higher order function means passing an function to another function. So I am given an example in this in case of extension function and higher order function, example of pain points in Android which we face. I'm trying to solve those using this feature. So everyone, we use fragments. It's like a de facto standard for unit dynamic reuse kind of in Android. And we set the fragment using this. We get the fragment manager. We begin the transaction. We then do our operation. In this case, it's replace. We replace the view home content with our my fragment, right? And we commit the transaction. So it's like a ceremony kind of API. You need to begin the transaction, do your job, and then commit it. Similar to like we do database operations. You need to open the transaction, do our stuff, and then commit it. So I mean, why can't we just focus on our main logic? What we want is we want something like this. Like tell Fragment Manager that we want to do this, and instead we just tell what we want to do, and the Fragment Manager or the system will handle a begin transaction and commit for us. This was like, I mean, this is what we wanted from start, but we didn't knew that. But with Kotlin, we can have such a feature. And now let's just look at how this can be implemented, the code of this. So in this case, we are using extension function. So you can see the load is the extension function which I have added into Fragment Manager because we are calling a method of Fragment Manager. So I have injected this load method into Fragment Manager and I passed another function into this function called as f. So f, and just ignore the fragment transaction for a minute. So the syntax for passing a function into another function is whatever name you want. The f can be anything whichever you want, the colon, and the brackets are your parameters to the function. And at the end there's unit. So in Java we have void, right, for empty types. So in Kotlin there is unit. It's pretty similar to void. There's nothing to worry. It's pretty similar. And in this case we are passing fragment transaction as a parameter to this f function. Right now, just get that there's an f function with the parameter fragment transaction, and it returns nothing. So in the next part, what we do is, like, as we are injecting this function into Fragment Manager, we can call the Fragment Manager method like begin transaction, and we can get the transaction and just skip this second line for the moment, and then we just commit the transaction at the last line. And in between is the logic, whatever we want to do, which in this case is it dot replace. So what we want to do is, like, we want to replace. So that part will be automatically called over here. So what in runtime, what will happen is begin transaction will get called, then replace will get called, and commit will get called. Like this function you just need to write once. And so one problem with this is that when you write this function, let's say if this function is called 1,000 times or 100 times, if you're using this function in a recycler view or a list view, it's going to be called every time the list view is recreated, right? So that will create 1,000 objects in the heap, which is not good for a mobile device where we need to optimize the memory. So Kotlin identified this problem, and they introduced a keyword called as inline. So at the start of the function, you see an inline keyword. So it is pretty similar to inline keyword from C++. So what it does is it takes this content of this function, the load function inside it, and it pastes the content of this function into where the function is getting called. So what happens is that only one instance of the anonymous object of this f is created only once. That it saves a lot of memory. So let's have a function.
Can you pass lambda functions?
Yes, yeah, definitely. You can pass lambda functions also. So I know it's a bit complicated to understand over here. So I'll just switch to Android Studio and show you how it feels in reality, how it feels to code. So this is my main activity. This is the main activity in Kotlin. So you might see there's no extends keyword in extends, and there's also not implements keyword in Kotlin. So you just use colon and whatever base class you want to inherit from. So that in our case it's base activity, and this is our onCreate. Basically, it's pretty much similar to Java, how we write activity in Java. So we were going to look at fragment. So I have last time for the extension function we discussed about the toast method, right? So this is the code, and you can see how it feels to write the code over here. So you can inside this function you can use everything which belongs to activity class. For example, you can just get context, or you can just get string. You can get this, like for example, you can call finish also from here. So it really feels like you're writing the function inside the base class. And one more good thing about this is that when you inject a method into activity class, all its base classes. So as you know, like we use app compact activity for activity. So all its base classes like app compact activity will get this method. So you can call toast even from app compact activity. So toast method is over here, and I will pass some string hello, and that's it. I don't even need to pass the duration because the default value can be taken. And that goes same for the fragment transaction load method. You can get the fragment transaction over here, Fragment Manager, and you can call the load method. Load method done, and you just need to call. So you can create a function. So I'll come back to that later. But you might also notice over here, this functions don't belong to a particular class. In Java, you cannot write any, you cannot write any function which doesn't belong to any class. But we are working in a functional paradigm right now. So you can just create a file. In this, my case, it's extension.kt. If you see at the top over here, extension.kt is just a file, and inside that I can just write functions without any class. And these functions are accessible everywhere in the project. That also depends on what visibility. There's also visibility modifiers, like how we have private, public, protected in Java. The same is there available in Kotlin. A little bit difference is there at some places. So let's go back at the presentation. So you get like how you can solve the ceremony kind of thing using higher level functions. So extension functions with receiver. So this is a unique feature to which is really unique to Kotlin. It doesn't is not there in any other language. So let's look at. So previously we saw that we can have a load method and we can do our logic in between. But did you notice what the it is doing over there? So basically, it is the instance of fragment transaction because because the replace method belongs to a fragment transaction class, right? So it in this case is the fragment transaction. We don't want that, right? We want something like this. We want something fancy. We want just load and replace because let's say you want to do 10 operations like it dot replace and it dot again replace. So instead of using it again, you can just trim it, and we want something simple and clean like this. So let's look at how we can do that using extension functions with receiver. So so this is the code for extension function with receiver. So it's pretty similar to the previous one, except that what we did, as instead of passing fragment transaction as a parameter, we took it outside and we made that function as an extension function. So it's going inception into inception. We are passing an extension function to an extension function. It's like inception movie. So and similarly, what we do over here, we begin the transaction, and as f is a extension function of fragment transaction, it already belongs to the fragment transaction class. So that's why we can call it fragment transaction.f because the f function belongs to fragment transaction. And that way we get this second case, a beautiful code. And this same can be done for preferences. You might do that for inserting or putting or modifying values in preferences. You need to get the editor, and then you need to begin the transaction. Put the strings, remove the strings, or remove key value pair, whatever you want to do. And at the end, you need to apply. So you can similarly you can build an extension function for that too, and just call preference manager dot edit and do your job in between. So there's on GitHub there's already a compiled list of all these extension functions. You can just copy paste into into your code, or you can make your own. This is extension function with receiver. Smart cast. So in Java, when we need to cast a object, we use instance of keyword, right? So in this case, I'm casting the view as text view. But even if I have, if the view is of text view type, again I need to cast it inside. Why? I have already checked for it. Why do I need to cast it again? So Kotlin is smarter in that way. If you check if the view is text view, it smartly casts the the view as the text view inside the if bracket. It knows that the view is going to be text view inside. So smart. It's a small thing by Kotlin. So in the complete Kotlin language, you will find small things like that way. Like I showed the smart casting. There's a lot of things, and one of them is string interpolation. So previously, when we wanted to append a lot of strings, we use plus, or for performance, we use string builder or string buffer, depending upon our case. So in Kotlin, there's a better way to do that. You just write whatever message you want, and if you want to inject that, just use the dollar and the name of the variable, and that way you can add any variable inside. And it's pretty similar to how we do in C++, printf. So instead of using $f or $s, we just directly inject it. So similarly, if you want to call a small function inside the string, you can use dollar and then curly brackets, and inside it you can call the function. So this function will print the current time. So if you are concerned about what Kotlin does at the perform, is it optimizing or is it using string buffer or what? When this Kotlin code is compiled, when this particular line is compiled, it generates string builder for this code. So that means it's not string builder, string builder's bytecode to the JVM. So that way, you don't need to consider, worry about the performance or having your string stored in the buffer or something like that. So it's a function. So Kotlin, as we know that Java comes with its standard libraries, right? A Java lang package. So similarly, Kotlin comes with standard library. It contains a lot of standard functions, and I call them Easter functions. It's my personal opinion. You can say it's not a particular word, but it's Easter function. So this is one of the Easter. There are a lot of these functions. So one of them is let block. So as we saw before, to handle a null, you need to add a question mark and then call the particular property or a function that object. But what if you wanted to execute a bunch of code if the value is not null? So what you will do is you will use a if block if the value is not null and write it inside. So instead of that, you can use a let block also. You can see if the text view is not null, then execute this block. In this block, what we do is we set the text and we set the text size to the text view. And if the text view is null, this block won't get executed. So you might get the question like, why should I use let block instead of if? So generally we use if there's an else condition to it. So let block should be used when you want to for two cases. First one is when you want to handle not null scenarios, and you want to group a similar bunch of code into one group, and there's no else, if there is no else condition to it, then you can use let block. There's also an apply function. So apply function is pretty similar to let block, except that the context of the calling variable is passed inside the if block. So you might see in the previous example we called it.text. We called it.textView. So what if you wanted to call you wanted to set 100 properties over here? You needed to call it dot. So instead of that, in apply you just skip it dot and just write what you want to do. Text is equal to istar and text is equal to 24. That's apply block. And I'm pretty sure like everyone of you has done this. So you wanted to measure the execution time of a code, right? A particular task. So what you do is you get the current time, you do your task, and you then again get the current time and minus the start time. And that way you get the execution time of the piece of code which you wrote. So it's pretty nice, right? But it's boilerplate code. You need to write it again and again. It's pretty simple, I know, but you need to write it again and again. So instead of that, in Kotlin, there is an extension function, a standard library function called as measure time millis. So what you do is like just open the do your task instead of measure time millis, and the execution time will be returned, and you can just print the execution time over here. So you need to no need to get the current time, minus it again, and Java stuff. You can use this. It looks much more beautiful. So that's measure time millis, and when is an super powered switch case in Kotlin. It's like switch case on steroids. When using switch case in Java, we missed a lot of things. Like initially, it didn't support string. I don't know if it does now because I have lost track of Java. But it misses a lot of things. It doesn't support ranges. If you wanted to check if that value is in particular range, you can't do that. So when expression tries to solve that, so you can see over here, like if also notice that in the when I haven't passed any variable like when and then bracket x, which we do in switch case, right? So this is the normal when x is odd, print x is odd, and if x is even, let's print that, and we can handle the else case. Else case is optional; it's like default. And Kotlin team also noticed that there's no need of writing break, because usually what we do is like we write cases, different cases, and we don't want one case to call another one, right? That's why we write break statement. So instead of that, just pass whatever you want to do, and break is automatically handled for you by the Kotlin. You can even do this. Like also notice that I have passed x to the when function, and inside you can check the range. If x is in the range of 1 to 10, then print that, and if x is not in the range of 10 to 20, then x is outside. And you can also have else condition, that if x is beyond infinity and so on. So that is, and there's a lot of more things you can do, even casting. Like you can pass a when text view, and you can pass when, and inside that instead of x you can pass view, and instead inside you can see if it's a text view or if it's a button or whatever you want to check. So that functionality is given. So any use case comes to mind when you see this when? So I'll show you where you can use the when in Android. So one specifically particular case is when using an on option item form. Yeah. Is it visible? So one particular case of when is this when, and you pass the item ID, and inside you can handle if exit button is clicked or a setting button is clicked, and you can perform the actions over here. So that's one use case of when function. So not everything is good with Kotlin. There are some issues, and it depends upon how you see them as issues. So first one is there's a slightly increased build time. That's because when you you write the Kotlin code, when it compiles, that Kotlin code needs to be compiled into the bytecode. that's an extra overhead. So you might see a slightly increased build time in Android Studio or IntelliJ. Must be Android Studio. And secondly, when you add the dependency for Kotlin in your Android app, and 6K dex count of your app is increased by 6K. So it adds 6,000 methods. If you compare with other languages like um, with Groovy or Scala, because some people were trying to use Scala for Android and Groovy for Android. So this is pretty small dex count as compared to that, and it depends upon how you see this dex count, because it what it provides is a lot for just for 6,000 methods. And thirdly, there's no static keyword as such in Kotlin. So that means you cannot write static method or variables in Kotlin. But the same functionality can be achieved using component objects, or you can write the package level functions, which I showed. That's because we are operating in a functional environment. If you go over here, extensions.kt, why we write static functions? Because we want to access them outside. Okay, we write static methods because we want to use them without creating the object, right? So if in Kotlin and in a functional paradigm actually, you can write functions without the class. So it's basically like without creating the object, you can access the function. Then why there's a need of static? But still, there are some cases where you need static, like static block or something like that. Then there's component objects keyword. Lastly, as we come from an object-oriented background, most of us, so there's a difficulty in coding in functional paradigm, which can be overcome with time once you start using Kotlin and learning, because functional paradigm promotes more immutability, null safety, and this function package level functions kind of. At the starting, but once you get into it, it's pretty useful. The higher order functions can be confusing at times. So these are the issues. So some conclusion. So with Kotlin, a lot of boilerplate code has been cut down. So that's why our code base is trimmed down. I guess when Google developer also tweeted that the Java file was 80,000 lines, it was trimmed down to around 40 or something, or maybe more than that. So that way you can trim your code. And the reason for trimming code is like it will be more readable and you need to test less than. Secondly, as this was a null safety system, and if you use it correctly, a lot of app cases will be cut down because a lot of nulls will be handled at the compile time itself. And lastly, Kotlin makes Android development a lot more fun again because there's so much fun to develop Android apps in Kotlin. And all Android developers all around the globe are in love with Kotlin, including me. So what's next? There are a lot of things which I have talked about regarding to Kotlin. There are so many cool features, and I would like to cover some one or two about them and give some pro tips to you guys. So one of them is like find view by ID. It's one of the what do you say, weak point of Android developers. We don't want to write that find view by ID. So that's why Jay Kotlin came up with this button knife library, right? But it's still, I mean, there's something missing. We wanted to do something better. So Kotlin saw this and they identified this problem and they came with a plugin to say goodbye to find view by ID. I'll show you a demo, like how, because the demo is much better than showing the syntax. So we go to the code, we go to the UI. So bear with me, Android Studio is a bit slow because it's in beta. This is Android 3.0 beta. It takes some time. So meanwhile, we can take some questions if you have any.
So let's say there are two activities like login activity and logout activity. And in one of those activities, I override or I create my own function extension. So in both the activities. So which one will be reflected if I call code function from the app
Right. So if you write two, then there can be two same method, same extension functions existing in two different files. But when you are using in your app compare activity, just make sure to check which one you are importing, because at the start stage, if you go over here at the import, you will see this toast method is imported from utils, and this toast method is over here, this one which I wrote in the extension.kt. So you might see that which one it is imported, which one is imported over here to understand from which file it's coming from.
So if Kotlin allows us to write, function instances anywhere in the code base, so will it not, if you're working in a team, will it not create a mess? So how do you prevent that?
So Kotlin basically allows to write anywhere, but what you should do is you should create a file. I'm not saying a class, a file, empty file like extensions.kd, which I made in this case. So you can just put all your extension functions in over there, all your extension functions, all your header functions, or whatever you did for utils, like you wrote account utils and view utils and pref utils. Similarly, you can put all the utils and form extensions in the extension.kd, and all the team members can work on that. So let's go to the UI. So I prefer the XML rather than the layout.
One size.
Oh, yeah, one second. I'm making it. Visible? So I have this floating action button over here, and I have given this ID over here, fab. So ideally, if you wanted to set a click listener for this fab, what you would do is you would go to your Java code or your Kotlin code. You would use find view by ID and then get the fab object and then call it set a click listener. And with button if you will use that annotation binds, and that way you can prevent. But Kotlin offers you a much better way. I'll show you that. So start with. That's it. So you can directly use whatever views you create in the UI in the Kotlin based upon their IDs. So what we did is we have this fab, this floating action button with an ID called as fab, and the same can be accessed over here. So you don't need to do find UI ID ever. It is done automatically for you now. So goodbye find UI ID. Finally. So you don't need to worry like how it's doing internally because it's you can of course see that because Kotlin is open source and you can read about it like how it's doing internally. I've written blogs on how it performs its job internally, but in conclusion, it's pretty performance efficient. So you don't need to worry that is it going to crash or do something. So one case which can happen is let's say that you created another layout. It also has this ID called as fab, and you wanted to pick that fab from the fragment underscore main this file. So you cannot do at the same time, but when you write fab, it will tell you like which one you want. So this one is floating action button, as you can see over here, floating action button, and the second one is text view. So whichever one you choose, it will be reflected in the import statement. You can see the synthetic imports and then the name of the file. So what happens if you set the text view as activity main and you used the fab from the fragment main? The app will crash. Not at the compile time. You will get a runtime crash because you are trying to access the view which is not reflected at all. So make sure to see like which thing you are importing. This is pretty cool, right? So one another example.
Once again, font.
Oh, yeah. We'll go back to presentation now. Yeah, just finishing up. So data classes. We all have model classes in our project, right? A lot of model classes like users, or if you wanted to handle retrofit responses, you created a model. Model is a basic POJO class, and you write properties in it. Like if it's a user POJO class, you write username, address, phone number, etc. like that. And for a small piece of model class, you end up writing a lot of lines of code. You need to implement the equals method. You need to write a toString. Then you need to write hash code. Then all the getter setters and constructor. And I'll just show you a demo how it works in Java. So I create a person class. So let's say private string name, and then address, age, salary. So now this is a people, and you will of course need a constructor, right? So this is a constructor over here, and then you will need all the data setters. These are all the data setters, and now you need toString. This is the toString, and now you need equals and hash code. Next. So you can see how many lines of code it is. It's 86 lines of code for what? Just 4 properties. And now you would say that IDE did everything for me. What's the problem in this, right? But what if you wanted to add one more method, one more property over here? Let's say like string designation. What if you want to do this? Then you would need to again rewrite the constructor, have data set. So you would need to again write the getter setters at the bottom, and again rewrite the equals, hash code, and toString, which is a waste of time. So, here's how we can do the same in the Kotlin. So there's also a Kotlin converter which converts a Java code into Kotlin. So I'll just perform that. It can do much better. So %k. So this Kotlin converter doesn't work. I mean, it works pretty good, but it also needs some efforts from your side also. So I'll create manually a Kotlin class, and data. I'll explain what data is. Where what I want name, string. Then what I want add, string. And then I want age. Right. So that's it. That's the code in Kotlin. For 86 lines of Java code, it's 1 line in Kotlin. So when you add a data keyword to any class, it automatically creates toString, equals, hash code, and all the getter setters for you. So if you try to access this, in your Java, in your Kotlin code, %k. So you just need to pass name over here. Like name is A, address is B, age is 24, and you get a %k object. And also, I said at the starting that Kotlin is 100% interoperable with Java. That means you could write some part of your code in Java and some part of your code in Kotlin. So I just give a small demo of how you can do that. So I created this class. Let's need to do that again. So this is the original Java person class. So what if I wanted to access it? I can directly use it in the Kotlin code. And just write name, A, the address, and what is info, and salary. So this is how it seamless is to write Java code in Kotlin, and vice versa can be done. You can write Kotlin code you can call Kotlin functions from Java. So that's how interoperable Kotlin is. So that's about data classes. So data classes is a data keyword available to which helps you write model classes. So one friend of mine, what he did is he didn't use Kotlin much. So I told him about data class. So he had about 200 classes in his Java code, and that means 200 files, Java files. So what he did is he created one Kotlin file called as data.kt. KT is the extension for Kotlin file, and inside that he used data class, and in just one file he wrote 200 classes in just one line each. So that's the beauty of Kotlin. You can just club all your data. I am not suggesting that you should put every data class in just one file. I'm just suggesting what are the possibilities with data classes. Some properties. Always remember with Kotlin, there is always going to be a better way to do something. If you feel that there's some we get habituated with the problems which we are facing in Android. Like we get habituated to write beginning the transaction and doing our job and committing. We have got habituated to that. So always remember with Kotlin, there's always going to be a better way to solve that problem. Like how we did, we solved the transaction problem using the load method, load extension function method. And there's also a Kotlin converter, which converts the Java code into Kotlin. It's pretty good, but it doesn't generate idiomatic code. I mean, exact proper code. Most of the time it does, but sometimes it doesn't. At that time, you need to manually make some changes. But it's pretty good to start with. And a lot of people have asked me, like, okay, this is great, Kotlin is great, but how should I add in my project? I have already made this, Java project. How should I add Kotlin? So what I suggest is you can begin writing test cases for your apps in Kotlin and have your main code in Java. So that way you get two benefits. You get to learn Kotlin, and secondly, you get to write your test cases, which most of us haven't. So that way you can test your app also. And going slowly, I also, like I said, how my friend converted all his Java. He didn't use Kotlin, he just used data classes, nothing else, and he just converted all the models into data classes. So same way you can do that in your project. At least you will save some space. And slowly migrate. It's not that Kotlin is in your language and you should go and delete your project and start writing a new app in Kotlin. Just slowly make a transition to it. So any questions?
The guy who raised the hand was doing Android development.
Yeah, why not? It's been so many months since Google I/O. I mean, Google I/O announcement of Kotlin.
Managers.
So yeah, that problem is also addressed by Krishna Lee. If you know her, you can probably search for her. So Krishna Lee is a Android developer from Pinterest. So she has given a great talk at Google I/O regarding how you can bring bring Kotlin coding into your Android apps in your company. How do you convince your manager? How do you convince your teammates? Because a great thing about Kotlin is interoperable, right? So even if 4 people know Android, just Java, you can write in Kotlin and they can still do their job in Java and slowly make a transition to Kotlin. And Kotlin is pretty easy. If you see, the syntax is pretty easy. Yeah, some things are tricky. So I took around 2-3 weeks. That's my case to learn Kotlin. Still, there's so many things, great things about Kotlin, and every day they're adding new things. So recently, in their new version, they announced this parseable. So we know that if you want to create a model with parseable, right, we need to implement the parseable and we need to handle write object methods inside it. So instead, just add an annotation at the rate parseable, and it does your heavy lifting for you. So that's how beautiful Kotlin is. Another benefit of Kotlin, adding Kotlin as a separate dependency, is that Kotlin as a language update itself. There's a different life cycle or release cycle of Kotlin and different release cycle of Android. That way you get benefit of both. And lastly, I want to conclude with this, that you can use any third-party framework, any third-party library with Kotlin seamlessly, even if it's retrofit or whatever you're using, MVP pattern or MVD and pattern, you can directly use with Kotlin. It's already there. You can use Glide. You can use any popular library you want. It works seamless, and all over the world, all Android developers have it. That's the reason why Google announced official support for it. Any other questions? No. Okay. Thanks a lot, Manoj. So these are the links for the slides. In case you can just grab the slides from the link.